Our top focus story on the broadcast, an intense face-off between troops of India and China at the line of actual control in Naku in North Sikkim. Of course, now they've disengaged is what we are being told, but fisticuffs were exchanged. 4 Indian soldiers and 7 Chinese soldiers were injured in the fist fight. And a fist fight, remember, is not normal at the line of actual control. India Today's editor defense, Abhishek Bhalla, with our top story tonight.
A rerun of the Sino-Indian border brawl on the shores of Pangong So Lake during the Doklam crisis in August 2017. The super-sensitive Indo-China border in North Sikkim is once again on the boil. Soldiers of the Indian Army and Chinese PLA were involved in a fierce face-off in Nakula area of North Sikkim on Saturday. Like the past brawl, men from both sides sustained injuries. The troops disengaged after local level interaction and dialogue between senior personnel.
Even the timing is little out of tune when both the nations are focused on the fight against Corona. I think, and also in the background, we had the strategic guidance by the respective leaders to have calm or the peace and tranquility on the borders. To have an incident like this is definitely a point to ponder, analyze, and ensure that it doesn't happen.
The brawl comes day after India asserted its sovereignty over POK. With the Met Department starting weather forecast of POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. India is also resisting China-Pak economic corridor from China's Xinjiang to Pakistan's Gwadar port, passing through POK.
Ever since India has served their notice to Pakistan for Gilgit-Baltistan, from where, the China-Pakistan economic corridor passes, Chinese are very disturbed with that. So they try to divert attention, they try to create new crisis, in the region.
This is not the first time Indian and Chinese soldiers have exchanged blows along the border. While the August 2017 incident also saw Indian and Chinese soldiers throwing stones at each other, both countries found themselves on the brink of a military confrontation over the Doklam Plateau issue. The crisis was finally averted after Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping had an informal meeting at Wuhan. China has been building up troops across the border, a trend India has been trying to match up of late.
The incident in North Sikkim is not an isolated one. A trend has been noticed of similar face-offs across the line of actual control. Officials say this is due to the fact that snow has melted and troop movement has increased. But fortunately, every time such a situation arose, it was resolved amicably through a dialogue. With Gaurav Sawant and camera person Parminder Sharma in New Delhi, Abhishek Bhalla for India Today.
So what should we make of the Dragon's latest dare? Joining me on the broadcast is Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, former Army Commander, Northern Command. Also with me, India Today's editor defense, Abhishek Bhalla. And Abhishek, what's the latest on the situation along the LAC?
Well, Gaurav, there were 2 skirmishes reported in the last 1 week. One was in North Sikkim, the other was in eastern Ladakh. And what officials have told me is that, they are assessing a trend because in the last few days, a lot of face-offs have happened across sectors at the line of actual control. And in these 2 incidents, it was noticeable that the troops from both sides came to blows and there was actually a clash. So that's something which is of very, very serious nature. It's very early to say whether there's a larger design behind these face-offs from the Chinese side, but the troops on the ground, commanders on the ground, are keeping a very close watch on Chinese activities, specifically after the melting of the snow and enhanced troop movement, which has triggered in a lot of face-offs of late.
Okay. Abhishek, for the moment, many thanks for joining me. General Huda, you've been Army Commander, Northern Command. You've looked at the situation very closely. So we've had one Doklam in the past. We've also had a Pangong So incident both in 2017. But General, how do you watch and how do you view these latest developments?
See, Gaurav, initially we were only aware about that one incident in North Sikkim at Nakula. But now, as Abhishek is pointing out, there's also been an incident in Ladakh, and both sort of involving physical scuffles with troops. It's not as if physical scuffles haven't happened in the past, but if you have two incidents of this nature at both places, I think we need to look at the situation closely, because this is not normal, that you would have scuffles, on both sides, and then you would have some soldiers injured. Generally, we don't reach this kind of situation. So I'm not giving an alarmist picture, Gaurav, yet. But I think it's something that we need to look at very closely and see if things like this sort of become routine in the future.
This is extremely interesting because, General, China is under a lot of pressure internationally. Australia, the United States, Indonesia, Philippines, there is so much pressure, but there's also so much tension in the South China Sea or with Taiwan. Would this be diversionary tactics as far as China is concerned, especially when there are reports of perhaps some trouble within China, not just with COVID-19 deaths, but also with the fallout and unemployment?
Sure, Gaurav, it could be. It could be. One way of diverting pressure, particularly internally, is to show how China is under pressure from various countries to do some things on the border. It's a tactics that has been employed in the past, and therefore we should just not rule it out. So it could well be something to divert the attention. Again, Gaurav, I'm saying we don't know yet, because let's see what happens in the future. But obviously, we also cannot completely dismiss it and say, it's just something that has happened. The way there is so much geopolitical churning that is happening, the kind of pressure China is under, and as you rightly said, how they moved in the South China Sea. Everything is not, sort of benign and normal. So, and if you have major incidents along the LAC, obviously it's not something that happens locally. It could well be, something that is planned at a higher level.
Because China is a very centralized decision-making dispensation. So whatever happens, General, and you understand China very well, could this be blamed at local commanders? Also, the fact that it's happened at two very different parts of the line of actual control, one in Ladakh, the other in North Sikkim. Would you view this as two isolated incidents? You've seen what happened in Doklam. You've seen what happened at Pangong So.
So again, Gaurav, as I said, we've had two incidents. Let us see what the trends are like. I think it would be premature to jump the gun and say this is a part of a larger design, sort of as of now. As I said, obviously these are not completely local incidents. But having said that, is it some very large sort of design and game plan by China? I think it would be better to wait and watch. these are very uncertain times. I think if both
Was China taken aback?
say that again, Gaurav?
When Doklam happened, was China taken aback? 73 days that standoff lasted, and India stared the dragon in the eye. Was China taken aback then? Is China better prepared to do something this time, or is it, like you said, is it too premature? But at the same time, we need to be prepared for any eventuality, whether on our northern borders or our eastern borders.
See, Gaurav, absolutely. China was taken aback by India's very strong stance in Doklam. And, whichever way you can spin it, this is the fact. Because we did see that they didn't actually anticipate such a strong reaction by India. As far as preparation is concerned, Gaurav, we have to be always sort of prepared for the worst. We have to be always completely prepared. Yes, we need to talk diplomatically. Yes, we need to, simmer down situations like this. But it would be foolish for India not to be prepared for something. We know what the long-term intentions of China are. It is to establish themselves as a global power, and to become a global power, the first thing they need to do is hegemony in the Asian region, and we are seeing that those trends are clear. Their presence in the Indian Ocean, their attempts to sway our neighbors on their side, their very close relationships with Pakistan. So certainly China is a long-term strategic rival, and in this rivalry, the only country which they see as a challenge is India. So we need to be very, very careful and make sure that we are not on the back foot at any time.
Oh, absolutely, General. And, since you mentioned Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, very recently, Indian Met Department in our weather bulletins, we've started talking about the weather and temperature at Gilgit, at Mirpur, at Muzaffarabad. How would China react to this? How would Pakistan react to this? Is this a spoke in the wheel when it comes to the CPEC?
It absolutely is, Gaurav. But I think India has made its intentions very clear. So they've said that future discussions will be on Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, which is under their illegal occupation. Will China be worried with this? Of course it will, because they have the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which passes through Gilgit-Baltistan, and therefore certainly, it's an area of concern for them, and it could well be that this kind of pressure on China could see some kind of reaction in J&K, and in J&K the only place where you will see reaction is in Ladakh.
Extremely interesting. So we should watch out for reaction, not just in Sikkim or perhaps Arunachal Pradesh, but also in Ladakh. There's one more question I wanted to ask you. India is a huge market, 1.3 billion people, and China realizes that our economic power is something that our markets is something that China would also want to look at. But if there are skirmishes at the border, are we an open market? Is this something just for the government and the armed forces to decide, or is it, as a former army commander, do you think we, as the people of our country, also send out a message whether we buy or don't buy Chinese stuff?
Look, Gaurav, when you're dealing with strategic rivals, and I'm saying this word deliberately, frankly, because there is strategic rivalry in Asia between India and China. Then every country has to leverage all its potential, and we have an enormous economic potential. There is a balance of trade which is mostly in China's favor, and surely we need to leverage our economic potential when we are dealing with China. It's a huge market that India has. The kind of Chinese goods that are being sold in India, we need to leverage it. I'm not saying completely by saying ban this or ban that. I'm saying smartly leverage our economic potential and economic power.
What you're saying makes immense sense. America mounts its own pressure on China, but America has its own national interest to protect. Australia has its own national interest to protect. Does India take on, the bullying, if I may put it that way, by China just on our own? Do we become a part of a bigger group? How do you see India's future while dealing with China?
See, Gaurav, again, how is China dealing with India, for example? Not only by itself, but also certainly looking at Pakistan in some ways as a proxy, to keep us busy along our western borders, etc. So alliances are important. But having said that, Gaurav, ultimately, it's your own national interests which are at stake. And while you can sort of look at your allies, I think in a crisis, India should be prepared to sort of stand alone and look at everything which is purely in our national interest, build up capabilities to be able to deal with China on its own. Too much reliance on partners, I'm not sure will stand us in good stead.
General, as always, such a pleasure talking to you. There's so much that one takes away from this conversation. For the moment, General Huda, former Army Commander, Northern Command, many thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.